Hello and welcome to Pussy Riot's Who Watches the World Cup, also known as Perisic the Thought, the podcast where we specifically talk about the Croatian player Perisic, the Perisic pod. I've pretty much run out of jokes there. Pussy Riot's Perisic pod, Perisic the Thought. This is Who Watches the World Cup. I know, the only podcast on the internet that compares international politics with the footballing prowess of the nations in this year's Euro 2020 tournament, even though it's 2021. Dave. Hello.
Hi.
I'm just gonna throw everything over to you now because we're on to Group D, and often when we come to a group in which we talk about England, the episodes go on for about 500 years. So I'm just going to chuck it straight over to you. Group D, baby.
Baby.
What's it all about?
We have actually got to see all the teams play before recording this episode.
Oh, yeah.
So we saw England versus Croatia, and we've seen Scotland versus Czech Republic. So it's a nice chance to be able to get a grip on the squads and how they're going to shape up, how they're going to perform, without having to delve into me making some very poorly informed predictions that never turn out to be true. We actually, as England fans, got a tournament off to a good start.
Oh my God.
Instead of being like, at least the things that I've seen, the people I've talked to about it, we're not all upbeat, like, I think we're going to go all the way. This was a great start. Everyone's going, well, that was a good start, but let's just see what happens next. Like, even though we've beaten what most people would say would be the hardest, the other best team in the group, and Scotland and Czech Republic shouldn't pose as much of a threat, people are still a little bit cautious in their enthusiasm. So
that is what I have seen is kind of the opposite of that, where the reporting I have seen on it is, we beat Croatia 1-0. Gareth Southgate's a tactical genius. And because I'm sure you can go into this a little bit more than I can, but before England-Croatia, the team sheet came out and we were like, oh my God, who's he picked? And then there were a couple of maybe little surprises, but the big surprise was Atletico Madrid's Kieran Trippier starting at left back. Now, why was that nonsense?
Nonsense.
Yes.
Well, everyone thought so.
Yes.
But we had seen a little bit of this in the warm-up games with Kieran Trippier playing at left back, which was strange when you have Ben Chilwell and Luke Shaw. They're actual number threes, actual left backs. So it seemed like Southgate was maybe experimenting with something. Or maybe one or both of Shaw and Chilwell weren't fit, or Kieran Trippier's dead ball delivery is obviously really valuable now that we haven't got Alexander-Arnold, so they want to try and get him in the team as best and as wherever he can. And he's obviously played there a number of times before in his career. This isn't a brand new thing. But to put him in for the first game of the Euros was a bit of a surprise, to say the very least. But as like Gary Neville said, I think after the game, was like, nobody saw that coming, but now no one can argue with his decision because it paid off.
See, that's exactly the thing that I mean, right? And I don't know if you remember when the New Orleans Saints won the Super Bowl. In fact, we watched it at your house all those years ago. Yes. And it was a crazy decision where they started the second half, the Saints came on to the second half, and they kicked an onside kick at the beginning of the second half, this is all American football nonsense. But normally, an onside kick is a move you go for when your team is like a couple of points down at the very end of the game, so that you can it's a gamble to try and recover a loss, because otherwise you're going to lose the game anyway.
Yeah, maybe the equivalent is like putting your keeper up for a corner in the 90th minute.
Exactly, yeah. But in the second half of the Super Bowl, the Saints started it with an onside kick, something that nobody in their right mind would ever have done. And they're like, oh my God, the coach is a genius. Like, he's just pulled, like, no one saw this coming. What a move. And everyone said that because it worked.
Yeah.
Right? If that had gone the other way, everyone would have been like, what is he doing? Starting an onside, like, if it could have got exactly the same, but the opposition team just got to the ball first.
Yeah, and they get possession higher up the pitch, and it's easier for them to score even more.
Yeah, but the whether or not somebody is a genius seems to be based around, like, often the luck of the draw. And that's kind of my slight problem with saying that, oh, well, it works. Because it did work, but it wasn't... I didn't think the Croatia game was, like, a rousing victory for England. Like, we won, but it wasn't like, God, we dominated that game. Like, what did you think of the match? Because there were a few times where we saw Kieran Trippier and we said, well, why isn't he passing? Oh, because he can't, because he's on his wrong foot.
Yeah.
And he had to keep turning, and it was he was in an awkward position at times.
It was definitely a defensive decision.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't put him there to try and create things from the left-hand side going forward. You put him there to put a stop to their wide players. So they started with Andre Kramaric on the right wing on Kieran Trippier's side, and he's been more of a centre forward. But they must have decided to go with trying to negate the inside forwards coming inside. So they have Perisic, who plays on the left, who always comes inside, and they figured Kyle Walker could handle him. But yeah, with Kieran Trippier, well, no, and you're making a face because we actually spent a lot of that game going, why the fuck is Kyle Walker playing?
Yes.
Because he kept making mistakes.
Yes,
but his mistakes all came from when he was on the ball. His passing was poor, and he dilly-dallied a couple of times. But
He dilly-dallied a couple of
times.
Yeah.
But when it came to his defensive positioning being in the right place and making tackles, he was actually pretty good. So kind of on both full-back positions, it seemed like there were defensive choices, because Perisic is known for being very, very quick, very mobile, and Kyle Walker is one of the fastest people I've ever seen in my life. So even if he can be criticised for lacking some concentration, and sometimes you would back him to recover because he's so quick and physical. But with Kieran Trippier, he wasn't there to try and like play balls up the line to Foden or Sterling, whoever was in front of him. He was there to put a stop to the Croatian wide players, and I don't remember an awful lot coming from his side in terms of threat for England. So, like you said, it was a weird decision, but the fact that it turned out to work almost perfectly, it's lauded as genius, as opposed to, unlike the Saints online kick thing from the Super Bowl, onside kick. Sorry, there's not much luck involved in Southgate's decision. That was just tactically sound. Genius is a bit of a strong word, but tactically sound. And the kind of when it was first called, I wonder how many people were like, he's a fucking idiot. What the hell is he doing? What a ridiculous decision. Because, we watched the World Cup 3 years ago where he made a lot of decisions, and a lot of them proved to be prudent, and it got us all the way to the semi-final of a World Cup. So I hope most people saw that decision and went, Southgate's up to something.
What's he doing? That cheeky Southgate. Yeah, well, another thing that this game introduced us to is that every team has a regional Gaza, and every team has their own Modric. We've learned that so far. Every team you see has somebody who has the kind of the bleach blonde hair, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone's got the Luka Modric
sort of blonde Alice band kind of look as well.
Yeah. So obviously in the England squad we've got Phil Foden, who is the
Stockport
Gaza. Then Grealish, who surprisingly didn't get to play, but Grealish is the English Modric.
He's the closest thing we have to a prime Modric.
Yeah. So. What seemed to happen in this game was England, they played fine, but the magic didn't happen. And then just as Raheem Sterling was about to be taken off for Jack Grealish, Raheem Sterling scored. And then Grealish just sat back down, and Southgate went, well, if Sterling scored, you don't take him off after he's actually done something, because you want to keep that momentum.
Yeah, if anything, it'll give him more confidence. And actually, after he did score, he started to be a bit more incisive and running, and just... I was criticising him in the first half because he was showing that kind of hesitation and indecisiveness that's kind of marred the second half of his season at Man City. And when he is off form, how that kind of manifests usually is he doesn't really seem like he knows what he's doing. Like he spends too much time in his head, it looks like. Because Raheem Sterling, when he's at his best, just collects the ball and goes. It's like he doesn't even think about it. It's just instinct. And that's what he started to do a bit more after he scored his goal and created... more of a problem for Croatia that way. So, he's the kind of player that we, again, in the World Cup, were pissed that Southgate stuck with him for so long, because he actually, in that tournament, didn't provide or produce anything, despite all of the faith Gareth Southgate showed in him. But now in the first game, when we're having those similar kind of feelings, like why is he gone with Sterling? Why didn't he start Rashford? Why didn't he start somebody else? Why not even Grealish? It's good for England that faith has paid off.
Yeah.
Because Sterling on form and full of confidence, like, he's going to be a real threat.
Yeah.
So that's all good news.
Yeah. So on the other side of the pitch, we've got the Croatian Modric.
Yeah.
Seem to be having a little bit of what you've kind of spoken about before as the Harry Kane problem, where you've got your captain, you've got your commanding player, and when the rest of the team's kind of letting them down, these are the players that go further back, get the ball, and are like, right, I've got the ball now, everyone just go, in that sort of thing. And it's a problem for Harry Kane, because he's meant to be our striker, and he's dropping back all the way to collect the ball, just to kind of make something happen. But for Modric, he's in the more midfield position.
Yeah.
But we saw Modric dropping all the way back, like almost behind the defenders at times, and trying to drive the ball forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Do you think Modric suffers from the problem where, in comparison to what last time they got to the World Cup final, this time it seems like Modric is trying to compensate for the rest of his team, which you wouldn't expect from the team that got to the World Cup final last time, right? Like, and is this Perisic the thought? Is this going to be Modric's last tournament?
I didn't think he was going to be at this one.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't expect him to be at the next World Cup when we spoke about Russia in 2018. But now that World Cup is only 18 months from now, and Modric is leading his country at the Euros, there's no reason to say that he won't be. He'll be, 37 by the time the World Cup starts.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's still their talisman. He's still there to make things happen. And he does do. I think it's more, unlike with Harry Kane, where you could kind of make an argument that when he does drop so deep, like into the number 10 or maybe sometimes into the middle of midfield to make things happen, he does have the ability to make a pass and to see something that other players maybe don't see. So if he was going to drop that deep, you want him to turn on the ball, spread it wide to the wingers, and then he needs to make his way into the box. And because he's not necessarily the quickest player, when he does drop deep and then play a pass, it takes him a while to get forward. So it doesn't necessarily really pay very many dividends, and it kind of seems as a fan that he's just getting isolated up front with the central defenders, and is getting a bit bored. And players like him, they need touches of the ball to keep them engaged, to keep their confidence up. They need to touch it. It's just a weird tactile thing, especially with more creative, nimble players. Like Phil Foden's the same.
Yeah.
The more he touches the ball, the better.
He was really exciting, especially the beginning.
Well, he was exciting right at the beginning, and he had that shot that came back off the post, and then he kind of drifted away. But with Modric, I think it's more of a tactical plan, where he will drop so deep in the air. Like you said, sometimes he was coming right back alongside the centre halves to ping things around, and going off of our American football analogy earlier, he is their quarterback. He wants to have the ball and see everything in front of him, because he can hit those receivers when he needs to.
Yeah.
But even though this Croatia squad is very similar in its makeup to the squad that got to the final of the World Cup, there's not that many differences in terms of personnel. I guess they're all 3 years older. Maybe they don't have that kind of momentum anymore.
It seems like England's 3 years older, and that's working to their advantage, because of the last World Cup they were one of the youngest squads.
Exactly. So yes, there are certain players who have come into their own, and I think you brought this up at the beginning of this tournament, that the fact that it got delayed by a year because of COVID has been really beneficial for a lot of teams, not just England, but specifically for England, with the likes of Phil Foden, who have really come to the fore. But with the older squads, they've only gotten 1 year older.
Interesting. After we watched the England-Croatia game, we had to wait a day to get the rest of Group B. You
were going to explain to me why the fuck England's Group D played before this Group C match.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm still convinced it's a time difference thing, but there's no explainer on the internet to say to me, well, this is why, Dave.
Well, I was of the opinion that it's because if they did it in order, that means England's first game at the Euros would have been at the beginning of the working week. And the powers that be, especially since Wembley is hosting a lot of games, were like, we'd rather that England played on a Sunday so more people watch it on TV.
Yes.
Whereas if you put it on at 3:00 on a Monday or a Tuesday, we're going to get less ratings. So,
I think some of that's probably true. I mean, like, that is how they sort out, which teams are playing when as well. It's a time difference thing for the nations at home as well. Like, that's how they work out their scheduling and stuff. So yeah, I get that. I imagine that probably does play into it in a fair fashion. We saw before how Croatia had almost complained a little bit that it was an unfair advantage for England to be playing all of their games at Wembley, which is true. And that is really why England should do better in this tournament, is because they are playing all of their games at Wembley. And Croatia and the Czech Republic are both at a disadvantage because both teams were supposed to be based in Scotland for the group, because Group D are playing in London and Glasgow. However, coronavirus has been so much of a problem, especially in Scotland now. I think Dundee is now the city in the UK. My beloved Dundee. That's serious. That's not a joke. I love Dundee. I did my master's degree there. They now have the worst COVID numbers in the country. I think it's like around 250 per 100,000, which for us was like near peak levels around here, like back in like January or something like that. So yeah, it's still really serious up there. So both Croatia and the Czech Republic decided, yeah, we're not going to base ourselves in Glasgow because that kind of seems like a bad idea. Because Glasgow itself, I think, is still under the most serious lockdown restrictions that Scotland has. Because for those of you who are listening for some reason who are not in the UK, we have a devolved system of government whereby we are the United Kingdom, but then the English government can set lockdown rules for itself, the Welsh government can set its own lockdown rules, and the Scottish and Northern Irish governments have control over their own territories, for lack of a better phrase. Which means that Scotland has different lockdown rules to England and Wales, and it's a crazy situation. But it means that the coronavirus has decreased a reasonable amount in the UK, although now it's going up again, and we'll get into that in a minute. But it's still in full bloom up in Scotland, especially in Glasgow. So both Croatia and the Czech Republic went, yeah, we're not doing that. We're going to stay in Croatia and the Czech Republic, and then we'll fly over for the games. But as we said before, with Wales having to go to Baku, Azerbaijan, like the addition of having to fly to the other country with a time difference, with climate differences, with all of those things, like that's a sizable disadvantage. Like, at least when Wales were in Azerbaijan, they had a week to get ready and acclimatise for the games.
Yeah, they're based there, aren't they?
Yeah, which both Croatia and the Czech Republic were supposed to do over here, but chose not to because they didn't want to get infected. Fair enough, can't hold that against them, but at the same time, they've kind of
disadvantaged themselves.
They've added to the disadvantage. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's something that you can play into it, and it is odd for England to be playing all of their games because even though Wales are based in Azerbaijan, I think they're playing one of the other venues in that group, and not only
Rome.
Rome. They're not only playing in Azerbaijan.
Yeah, and the Italians are also going to Azerbaijan for one game, despite Rome being the one of the hosting things. Yeah. So Italy aren't playing all of their games in Rome.
So I don't really understand why England aren't playing one of their games in Glasgow.
Yeah, they should be playing Scotland in Glasgow, shouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would seem kind of fair.
Yeah.
And this tournament, probably more than any that's ever come before it, home advantage might be what sways a lot of these games, because all these players have spent a year and a half playing in front of nobody. So suddenly have thousands of people chanting solely for your team and only having a sporadic few chanting for the opposition. That's gonna uplift you. Yeah,
and for England as well, we have the advantage, assuming we were to make it far. We have the advantage of the semi-finals and the finals being played in Wembley Stadium.
Yeah, like what a draw that would be. It's like being in the FA Cup and knowing that if you get to the semi-finals, you get to play at Wembley.
Yeah,
like that's a massive motivation in itself. It's a huge venue, and for England at a major tournament to be like, lads, if we get to the last four, we'll be back in front of our own fans. That's huge.
Yeah, and it's especially bizarre because Wembley was chosen because the other stadium, I can't remember where the semi-finals were meant to be played, but I think it may have been Rome as well. But they decided that, again, coronavirus was too much of an issue, so they decided to place it in Wembley instead. But the UK is the country in Europe with the most coronavirus deaths. France has had actually more cases than us, but we have had far more coronavirus deaths. The only country that comes close to the UK with deaths from coronavirus, take a guess.
Across the whole world or just Europe?
In Europe.
Italy,
yeah, that's right, yeah. So you've got two of your major hosts being Italy and the UK, and both of them have the highest coronavirus deaths in Europe. And again, it's that thing of playing into the pandemic where more players now have had to go out permanently because of coronavirus, and well, I guess I can use this to transition over to the politics as well. But yesterday, Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of nobody, decided that the new Delta variant, this is what they've done. They decided, it was the India variant, right?
Yeah.
But they decided that the more we called it the India variant, I don't know, the more un-PC it seemed. So they called it the Delta variant. It also means that we don't have to refer to it as the Alpha variant as the English variant. So that was very clever of them.
Oh, okay. How self-serving.
Yes, yeah.
Well, Delta variant sounds like something from Star Trek.
It does, yeah. And it's thankfully Voyager's going to be there, so it'll be all right. But they said, because of the Delta variant, we're going to have to increase lockdown. Lockdown was supposed to end at June 21st. And they called it Freedom Day, Dave. They said June 21st, Freedom Day. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And all the scientists went, there's a problem here. They went, no. And for months, there was, the Delta variant now accounts for 91% of new cases of coronavirus in the UK. They're like, yeah, it's fine. We're keeping an eye on it. And then a week to go, they're like, yeah, we're going to have to postpone it by a month. And I think it's fair to say the country, not best pleased.
No.
And that, again, is Boris Johnson's own fault, because he said, we're going to... Oh, this is my Richard Nixon again. I've lost my Boris Johnson, I found my Richard Nixon. I can't.
Just do it as Richard Nixon.
Yeah,
it's fine. Okay.
I'm not a crook. It's like, Richard Nixon does coronavirus. Oh, that's a nightmare. We're going to have Freedom Day on June 21st, said Richard Nixon, Boris Johnson. But because he kept saying it again and again and again, everyone was like, yeah, all right, well, that's it. And businesses set their opening days in Bath City and Cardiff, Dave.
Oh, is that not going to happen anymore?
I don't know, because I don't want to look it up and see that they've called it off. But they have to, right? Because they can't open up for big sporting arenas like that, as they were supposed to do.
Well, I didn't really have any personal pain around this delay until that piece of potential news.
It's if that's the case, and surely it must be. I hate Boris Johnson
even more.
Even more. But this is the problem, right? The lengthening of the lockdown rules is not enough. Because the spread of the Delta variant is happening because of the current relaxation of lockdown rules, right? If what he wants to do is to stop the spread of it, this isn't enough. If he wants to stop the spread of it more, he has to lock down further, right? So what he's doing is another half measure. And this pisses people off because he's told people that, it's going to end. That's going to be the end of it. And rather than it being the end of it, he's continuing with a half measure, which means by July the 19th, what's going to happen, Dave?
My dad's birthday.
Yeah, and what else?
I don't know.
We're going to have a bigger lockdown.
Oh.
That's my prediction. The Euros are going to end. We may even have to leave Wembley. They may have to rearrange. I'd put that down. I don't know who's going to win the Euros, but I reckon the finals are going to be taken out of Wembley, and I reckon we're going to go into a further lockdown, a tighter lockdown than we're in now. Because what they've said now is, we're just going to keep going as we're going. Well, how's that doing for you, Boris? Not great.
Not great.
Not great.
It seems so un-English to be so dead set on this.
Yeah.
It would be such an English thing to be like, well, we'd like it to be the 21st and we'll just see how it goes.
Yeah.
But it's almost kind of Trumpian and American presidential to be like, nope, it's going to happen. There's nothing's going to stop us. we're going to have free, and using the word freedom, and like just planting that in the papers and in the public consciousness is so American, yeah. Instead of being very like kind of reserved and uncommittal, like is the English way.
Yes,
it's been hanging out with Joe Biden too much.
Yes, well, the G7 as well, taking place in St Ives in Cornwall, has just started to wrap up. They've had big conversations about the climate, about coronavirus, and they just released a united statement on China as well, trying to take action on China for the treatment of the Uyghur people and the pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong. Needless to say, China weren't very happy about it. And they released a statement saying, "Stay away from our domestic affairs. We just want to not look like A.A. Milne characters and be left alone."
Callback.
Said the Chinese government. The embassy as well saying, "Oh, this is just all American propaganda." Again, it's not domestic affairs. It's Hong Kong is still technically an autonomous region, so it's in the special Hong Kong SAR, Hong Kong Special Autonomous Region. It's not technically domestic policy. Just throwing it out there. Anyway, let's move on.
Okay.
Let's move on to Scotland. There was a lot of hype for that Scotland game, and you were hyped for it. Before when we spoke about Wales, you spoke about Wales, what are the chances of Wales performing, so on and so forth, and you were like, Wales, I don't know, Scotland are the ones to watch. Why did you think that Scotland might be the little British team that could?
I think maybe I was suckered in a little bit by this great swell of enthusiasm by the Scottish people, and the Scottish pundits were like, we're going to do great. And the more I looked into the squad, I thought, well, actually, the squad is pretty decent and very together, and what I expected from them is what they definitely showed against the Czech Republic, which was this kind of warrior attitude, like playing for the country. So they never stopped. They battled constantly, and then ultimately what let them down is a little lack in quality in little areas. And well, actually, to be honest, it was 2-0 because of a wonder goal.
Yeah.
And the first goal was, again, well-crafted. The defending was fine. Obviously not perfect, otherwise maybe they would have kept it out, but it was a good header.
And the second goal was the best goal ever scored at the Euros.
Oh, shut up. I hate this. I hate this, like, sensationalisation of anything that happens and it's new.
Yeah.
It's like, sure, it's a great goal. And actually, the more you watch it and the more how you see it bends, he puts it really wide and it bends back into the goal. It's unbelievably good. It's excellent. But then to be like, it's the greatest goal of any Euros. Like, really? Can we sit down and watch every single one and rank them? Or is the papers and the media just gone, come and look at us, come look at this, come look at these words, best ever. And, it's just all press bollocks that pisses me off.
Yeah, we were saying this, we were walking Dave's dogs earlier. And I said to Dave, I don't know if you can call it the best goal ever when the goalie isn't in his goal.
Yeah.
And the goalie gets back. He's so close as well. He gets so close to it. But again, like that again speaks to the quality of the goal, that the keeper wasn't able to get to it. But it was a good goal.
It was a good goal, and you feel bad for Scotland, because they really deserved, on their effort and their pride and their honour, they deserved more, but ultimately they let down. But then they were let down by some of some of the tactical decisions too.
Well, I mean, we can just say, Scotland's first major tournament since '98.
98 was their last major tournament, and then
they're playing at home, and to lose 2-0. Perisic the thought. But it happened. So
so it happened. I wished more for them, but if anything, they didn't look like a team that aren't gonna. They may walk away with no points, but hopefully that kind of fight and spirit karma will reward them for it, and they'll get to go away with something. Because they impressed me, at least by their heart. And some of their players
they looked good. They just got unlucky with that first goal, and they were unlucky that the Czech team played so well.
Yeah, that Schick header was really good as well.
Yeah, and that second goal again, once in a tournament style goal. It just happened to be against them in the
game. But like even from the beginning, they played one of their probably their main striker, Lyndon Dykes, up front. And as they've done a lot, they played Ryan Christie up top with him, but he's more like a midfield winger. Mm-hmm. And I missed the beginning of the game, and I walked in going, waiting to see Che Adams, because
when he came on, and he played great.
He played brilliantly when he came on at half time. He made things happen. He was a handful for the defenders. Yeah. They had way more chances after he came on. So I was kind of thinking, if that's tactical, then that's a mistake. He fucked up. And if he wasn't fit enough, mm-hmm. Fair enough, and he got a good half. And based on that performance, if he doesn't start the next 2 games, that'll be a real letdown. But yes, even their defenders were great. Grant Hanley was a fucking boss.
Yeah.
He was excellent.
Yeah, that was the thing. Watching Scotland was going, these guys are playing really well. They just got the bum result.
Yeah, and I mean, my 2 cents is that if Che Adams was playing from the beginning, mm-hmm. Twice as many opportunities are created than there were, and maybe they get lucky. Maybe a little bit of brilliance gets them a goal, and who knows what happens. What happens from there? But Stuart Armstrong, John McGinn, they all put in a great shift. Yeah, Andrew Robertson obviously is their key man. Maybe with defence they missed Kieran Tierney, who wasn't fit. So Jack Hendry had to come in and play in his place. But even he played quite well, and it was him who had that shot off the crossbar in the second half, which was so close. So yeah, I mean, I think people expected Czech Republic to win. Anyone besides the Scots expected Czech Republic to maybe scrape it.
But Scotland had beaten the Czech Republic twice in the run-up to this tournament, I think. So it wasn't as if this was a game that Scotland, that we could have said, the Czech Republic may be, historically a better team, they've got a good squad, but like Scotland have beaten them on the way here, and not in friendlies either, in like the I always want to call it the Cup of Nations. So it's that, maybe the Czech Republic, they lost to them twice, and they're like, not again, not today, Zerg. We're playing Patrick Stick shit.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point, because that raises some concerns about England's qualification for this tournament, which we had Czech Republic in our group, and the one game we lost was against Czech Republic.
Yes.
We beat them 5-0, but then we lost against them 2-1 away. So, yeah, it's kind of goes to show that the Czech Republic don't necessarily take their run into consideration. They show up on the day, and either they do it or they don't.
Yeah. What do you make of this Czech team?
I wouldn't say that I was impressed, but they seem to have they're very organised and very tight. I think they seem to be very tight knit, and they've got some players that really kind of stand out. Like I've talked before about, I'm a fan of Souček and Soufal because they're West Ham players, and also in an unbiased way, they're actually very good at their jobs. Souček is a box to box; he's a threat going forward, not only with his head, but he's scored goals for West Ham and for his national team, and he's a handful in defence as well because of his height and his strength. And Soufal has a great delivery from the right. But Alex Kral was another player I thought was quite impressive in central midfield. De Reeder, their captain, their kind of number 10, is pretty decent too. But then they're one of these teams where you pick out players and go, pretty decent, pretty good, like kind of impressive. Like, but they don't have any superstars, which kind of, I think we've talked about before, kind of helps a team perform as a team and really rally together when they all kind of feel on a par with each other. There's no one player they go, Modric, make it happen. Or even Croatia, they have Perisic, and actually something I wanted to bring up in this group, excluding Jordan Pickford actually, but the Croatia, Czech Republic and Scotland goalkeepers have played really well, and there would have been far more goals if they hadn't switched on. David Marshall made great saves for Scotland, and even the Czech goalie made some really good saves. Lyndon Dykes had 2 great chances that were saved.
Yeah. And all Jordan Pickford had was stupid hair.
He had stupid hair. Yeah.
That's my contribution to my footballing knowledge to this episode.
Yeah, you weren't happy with his hair.
I wasn't, but I had a similar feeling watching the Czech team play, where they won 2-0, but I didn't think, I'm worried about them when we play England.
No, not. I mean, I guess like we said before, we just beat Croatia. Yeah. Presumably the other best team in our group. So
yeah,
as long as we go into the game with the right kind of mindset, which under Gareth Southgate, I think England are quite good at. Like, especially in tournaments. We saw against like Panama and teams like that where we didn't go, we're going to breeze this, and then it turns out to be embarrassing that we scraped through. Like, we scored 6 against Panama, and the Czech Republic are obviously a far greater team than Panama, but I've got a mathematical reason why we maybe should be worried about the Czech Republic.
Oh, this is the kind of hot takes we love on Who Watches the World Cup.
Very basic.
Stat me, baby.
Very basic mathematics, more like a pattern.
Okay.
But if we look at the Czech Republic's record in European Championships,
yes,
their very first one post Czechoslovakia.
Oh yeah.
As a Czech Republic,
as an independent country,
was 96.
Yeah.
And they finished second. They lost the final to Germany.
Right.
Then the next one in the year 2000, they don't make it past the group stage.
Mm-hmm.
Next year, 2004, they finish third. They get to the semi-finals. Following tournament, they don't get out of the group stage. Then in 2012, they get all the way to the quarterfinals.
Uh-huh.
Then in the last one in 2016, they only get to the group stage. So if you follow that pattern, you might expect them to get out of the group into the knockout rounds. But
they should only get to the round of 16.
Yeah, because they've gone
progressively down each time.
Okay. Yeah, you enhance this even further. Yeah.
Yeah.
If this is a great prediction, they might get to the round of the first knockout round. But
yeah, we need to put money on it, people. Quick. Put money.
I've got a similar thing with the Croatia's history in the Euros. So again, 96 is their first tournament since they broke away from Yugoslavia, and they got to the quarterfinals. Didn't qualify in 2000, but then in 2004 didn't get out of the groups. 2008 quarterfinal. Next tournament, don't get out of the groups. 2016 they get to the round of 6. They get all the way to only to the round of 16. They don't make it further than that. So again, going by that pattern,
they should might be back up.
No, they might not get out of the group. This is the year where they shouldn't get out of the group.
Oh,
if you believe in that kind of voodoo.
I'm believing in the voodoo, Dave. That's two bets to put on, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean, they've played one, lost one, so the maximum points they can get is 6, and the Czech Republic might actually be a dark horse for the second qualification place in this group.
Ooh, that's exciting. That's exciting stuff. I like that.
Or Scotland win both of their next games and everyone else draws and Scotland go through top.
Yeah, well, again, this is a great chance for me to transition over, which is talking about, those... how well the Czech Republic did since they became an independent, the Czech Republic.
Yeah.
How well Croatia did when they got their independence. Bam, Scotland, independence. What a segue. That's seamless. Can you imagine a better segue? Perish the thought. So, Scotland and independence, because that's coming back again. We had the previous referendum, not even 10 years ago. And when Scotland voted to remain, there was a large understanding that by choosing to stay in the United Kingdom would also be in Europe. And if Scotland left the UK, it would have to then apply for its own entry into the EU. And the EU specifically said during that referendum, don't you be thinking it's going to be easy, because they wanted Scotland to stay in the UK for all of the conveniences that come with it. And so they said, we're not just going to let you in because we're historic friends, buddy boy. So Scotland chose to stay in the UK. And then, of course, England decided in collective madness that we were going to leave the European Union, which left Scotland being like, what?
Oh, fuck.
Exactly, Dave, exactly. So we now end up then with the talk of the next independence referendum, because similar to Brexit, what we saw in both Scotland and... I guess it's the reverse, really. In Scotland, it was a lot of young people that wanted to leave the United Kingdom and form an independent Scotland. Whereas in Brexit, the young people wanted to remain in Europe. And that's kind of what's interesting about the Scottish independence referendum, is that it's kind of a reverse Brexit. Brexit is we don't want those foreigners coming into our country kind of independence. Whereas the Scottish independence is, we don't want to be told what to do by the English kind of independence. And it's much more of a left-leaning form of independence than the Brexit one was. Because, at least in Scotland, you actually can say a lot of decisions are being made that we don't get that much of a say in. Whereas with the UK and Brussels, like we would say, oh, those Europeans are telling us how bendy we can have our bananas. It's like, are you freaking serious right now? And they were serious. They were so serious about how bendy they wanted their bananas to be that we left the EU. And the SNP, the Scottish National Party, have always been the stalwart campaigners for Scottish independence. Alex Salmond, the previous head of the SNP, led the last referendum. But after that referendum and the decision to remain a part of the UK, he kind of stepped down, and then his student, his protege, Nicola Sturgeon, stepped into the fray and has become one of, I would say probably the most consistent and influential politician in the United Kingdom right now. Like, she's been there for years. Like, the Conservatives have had, 3 prime ministers since Brexit, and Nicola Sturgeon's just like, bring it on! She's, I think, pretty well liked. Like, even in England, I think there are a lot of people that would say, I wish the Scottish National Party weren't just Scottish nationals. Like, if Nicola Sturgeon ran for Prime Minister, I think she'd probably end up doing pretty well.
Yeah, I like, whenever I see her on the news, I like her attitude and the things that she seems to stand for. And I agree with you. Like, when the Scottish referendum was happening, I was like, well, I can understand that.
Yeah.
I can understand. And eventually it seemed more logical to stay with UK at that time. So whichever way it went, I was like, you know what, there are good arguments both sides. But then when it came to Brexit, and maybe it's still as divisive as it was, God knows, was it 5 years ago when the vote actually happened?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like there was a lot of bad arguments on the side to leave, and which kind of swayed people, and all the good arguments seem to be drowned out.
Yes. Then we end up with a pretty crazy situation at the beginning of this year. I don't know how much you saw about what was going on in Scotland with Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond. Yeah, because as people may know, I have a horrible obsession with the news. And you have a very healthy obsession of not looking at the news. Which means that you get to stay a little bit more sane than I do. Because I'm driven nuts by the state of the world. So, Alex Salmond, the leader of the SNP and the former leader of the Scottish independence movement, had a number of allegations against him made by women, and of harassment and assault. And as he was being investigated, he was cleared of charges, but started to pass the blame over to Nicola Sturgeon. When Nicola Sturgeon said, I denounce Alex Salmond for all of the terrible things that he did, and I can't believe that the man that I knew and trusted so long would do something like this. And it goes to show that I was tricked by, someone I thought of as a close friend. And Alex Salmond was like, you've stabbed me in the back and I'm going to take you down. And so what he did was put forward a bunch of evidence, essentially, that Nicola Sturgeon knew about these allegations that were being made against him and didn't do anything about it. And that kind of came out earlier in the year, and she was investigated by the Scottish Parliament. And she was cleared of having covered it up for Alex Salmond, but a separate report by the Scottish Parliament condemned her for the way that she did it, and basically said the evidence that she has given here is pretty sketchy, where it's been she went for a private conversation with Alex Salmond 2 days before these allegations came out and before they became public, and so on and so forth. And the idea that she didn't know about it was kind of so preposterous that her explanation of what it was, it's a whole thing. It's just it's a whole a whole mess. But that's shaken a lot of people's faith in her and, her trustworthiness, because it goes to show that she would, she would have been willing, if what was said was true, she would have been willing to sweep women's, safety and the allegations of assault and harassment. She would have just swept it away, for the sake of politics, and that affected quite a lot. The other thing was that Alex Salmond went, I can't believe that you stabbed me in the back. You basically kicked me out of my own party, to do all of this, and he had a storied political career that was then tarnished by these allegations, rightfully so, if they were if they were accurate. But he still got a lot of support amongst Scottish nationalists. So he went, I'm going to make my own party. So now you have Nicola Sturgeon with the SNP, and Alex Salmond has his own separate independence party to go against Nicola Sturgeon for control of the Scottish nationalist vote. Even though they both believe very, very similar things, it has created this schism where not many, but a few SNP politicians have gone over to join Alex Salmond. Which you kind of end up in this Bill Clinton-esque scenario where a man's proclivity for not treating women the way that women should be treated potentially derails the entire political movement. Bill Clinton's entire ambition as a politician was derailed because he kept putting his dick in places he shouldn't have been putting his dick. And the same thing could well end up happening to Scottish independence, whereby, they get this chance for a second referendum, which Boris Johnson isn't going to let them have unless he literally has to. Because as with Catalonia and places like that, and with Ukraine, where we were speaking about Russia and Ukraine, you can't just have an independence referendum because you decide you want one. Right, it has to be approved by the country that you're in. And so before, the Scottish independence referendum was agreed by Westminster, and they said, whatever you do, you do. But once again, the Scottish independence referendum, the second one, would again have to be approved by Westminster. And Boris Johnson is like, there's no way I'm going to allow that to happen unless I literally have to. And so maybe we won't see that vote again. But if we do see that vote, then will the nationalists defeat themselves by having these, warring camps based around Alex Salmond potentially, allegedly is a better word, allegedly being a harasser and so on and so forth.
So is the nationalist vote then kind of just being driven by this cult of personality, whether they go, well, this is what I believe, but I have two people telling me to back them, and I've got to decide which one I like the most?
Well, it is one. Yeah, it is a cult of personality is probably a good phrase to use. Because can you name any SNP politicians other than Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon?
I even forgot about Alex Salmond.
If
you'd asked me to name one Scottish politician, I would have said Nicola Sturgeon, and then I would have run out of names.
Yeah, and that's kind of because she is the force that drives that party and the force that drives that movement.
I was going to say, and the force that drives that country.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. So if you were to remove Nicola Sturgeon, and there were calls, I think there was a vote of no confidence in the Scottish Parliament over whether or not she should be allowed to continue as leader. Then, if she was to be removed, the independence referendum suffers from not having that figurehead. And who takes over? And that's one of the reasons that she's been such an enduring figure in British politics. Is British politics now is weak. And you look at the politicians that we have, and they are weak. And, it's that old, the Americans have it all the time. Where's our Eisenhower? Where's our Kennedy? And you look back and you go, well, Obama, a leader, right? An actual leader. Joe Biden, maybe not a leader, but an experienced politician, in his own way. And then you've got George Bush, like George Bush was the kind of president you go, oh, what happened to the Eisenhowers or the Roosevelts or something like that. But with us, it's like, who was our last great prime minister, really?
Probably before our lifetimes.
Yeah. I'd say like maybe an argument could have been made for Tony Blair being the prime minister of the moment at that time. It was like a new era of politics, and he was the right man, like similar to Obama. Obama was the man for his moment. Tony Blair was that man for his moment, and then, he went into 2 wars and doesn't have a great reputation in the UK anymore.
Yeah.
And I think Nicola Sturgeon is, the politician for her moment, and she is that political British icon. And that contributes to that feeling that we saw of Scotland, where you were captured by the this is our first tournament since '98, and this isn't the rugby, this is football, and we've never got to be here, and we're gonna give it our best, and we're gonna braveheart our way through it. Said all of the BBC punditry, and that's kind of caught up in that continued nationalism, and I guess it now remains to be seen whether that can rally. After having been defeated by the Czech Republic, will that national spirit continue, or will it be like, well, we've lost, and we keep losing?
Yeah, like what I've been reading seems to be very much like a very dramatic fall from this elation and excitement and anticipation to just plummet back down to, we're Scotland, we always lose at football. And it's, how that's maybe affecting the Scottish, not identity, but the Scottish spirit on the whole right now. But hopefully they won't get too down in the dumps. There's still 2 more games. And if England are safe somehow to go through, although Scotland's our next game, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
Okay, well, what I want from the England-Scotland game is a fucking amazing game of football.
Yes.
Like a great rivalry played out on the pitch, goals, England can win 3-2 or something. That's fine. But that, and then maybe that can be what gives Scotland enough to go out big in their last game against Croatia. But you'd hate to see them shrink, both from the footballing perspective and as a country.
Yeah. Next episode is Group E, but the next games tonight are Group F. Tonight we've got Hungary, Portugal, France, Germany. Now I'm excited for those games.
Those are going to be, I think those are going to be really cool games. And there were some surprises in last night's Group E games.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think Portugal go into this one a cert to win, but they drew, I think, in the last Euros. Was it the last Euros or the World Cup, where they were in the same group, and Hungary got a 2-2 draw, and that was amazing. So maybe there can be a repeat of that. And then France and Germany, 2 of the powerhouses of European and world football historically, even though one is very much in the ascendancy and one is kind of holding on by a thread to their great legacy. It'd be great to see. I'm really excited to see actually what Germany are like now, because they've not had a great series of results over the last year or so, their World Cup was an absolute disaster. So I have no idea it's a bit like with the Holland game. I have no idea what to expect, and the Holland game turned out to be probably the most exciting game of the tournament so far.
It was a cracker, Dave. Yeah. It was a crack. It was a thunderbolt of a game. And
that was one of these football games where we weren't really sure which side we were on, and then we were up cheering the goals as they went in, because it was just
such a great game.
Yeah.
Then, somewhat unfortunately, we have the counterpoint to that game, which is the next group, Group E, including Spain and Sweden, which we thought might be an amazing display of football, and turned out to be well, we'll get into it on the next episode.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah. So join us for the next episode as we break down just what the hell is Luis doing managing the Spanish team. Join us then.
That's a really niche joke.